Joining us now is 6th Ward Alderwoman Daniela Velazquez from the city of St. Louis with instant reaction to this vote that just passed on Wednesday this week. What do you think the impact will be as police start to report the immigration status of people they encounter, people they suspect of Class A misdemeanors and higher? How is the community going to feel this?
Well, the community is already feeling this. I mean, number one, people have they're scared. They will continue to be scared. And I think it is disingenuous to everything that the Republicans are saying, that this is not about, that this will not hurt our economic growth. There's just a recent story in the New York Times saying that immigration and recruiting new Americans to live in St. Louis was part of the bedrock of boosting our population. A law like this does not do that, full stop.
Advocates for the immigrant community would often say that people who may not have full citizenship or may be undocumented or in that process of becoming documented, these folks are often more prone to avoid any kind of criminal activity for fear of just this. So I guess my question is, if a person is not suspected of possessing or dealing drugs, or if they're not resisting arrest, or if they're not engaging in any of these other criminal behaviors, what would they have to fear?
Well, I mean, one, people are being targeted. I mean, people are worried about being pulled over anyway. We already know. I've already heard stories in the community that that's happened.
In St. Louis?
In St. Louis, where they get stopped for a traffic violation and somebody's called ICE. Two, what I think this also does is it makes people less, it encourages people to not have relationships with law enforcement. And for law enforcement, knowledge is kind of the bread and butter of how they fight crime, right? So if people are reluctant to have relationships with law enforcement knows less about what's happening in the community. It also gives an opportunity for bad actors to target immigrants or new Americans who they know aren't going to report crimes against them because they're afraid to contact police.
There's that side of it too. This bill deals with informants and how prosecutors must report out any benefit they've given to an informant. But I wonder if a person who's here and undocumented witnesses a crime, are they more or less likely now to report it?
I would assume that they're going to be less likely to report it. And I think what this also opens up is, we're really setting the stage for the city to have, the same kind of database to track people's citizenship status as the rest of the state. And what we saw, recently at Columbia University with, somebody getting arrested and slated for deportation as a green card holder and their, authorization being revoked. I mean, that's really scary stuff for people. And I think that this opens, St. Louis up for things like that to happen here.
Yeah, and for our viewers who may not know, you spent a considerable amount of time working with the American Civil Liberties Union, and there's a First Amendment issue there. But when it comes to some of the, campus protests we saw at WashU, at Columbia, there were some iterations of language that were quite hateful, that went beyond, you could make the argument they incited hate speech. You could make the argument they incited anti-Semitic, or, some extreme critics would even say some of it was terrorist-driven language. How should we understand this question of?
I mean, the ACLU's answer was the best remedy to hate speech is more free speech, right? And I think what we're looking at is the question here with what happened at Columbia University is the content, and that's always been, the question with First Amendment issues. I mean, you're a reporter, you live in the First Amendment world. What are we going to stop people based on, if the content is not hateful, right? Because hate speech is different than free speech.
Even if it's highly objectionable.
Even if it's highly objectionable, even if people don't like it. And that's the whole, even with protesting, it's the same thing. Protesting legally doesn't have to be nice or comfortable. But if the content, if we're in a situation where people are being arrested and their citizenship status is being threatened by the content of their speech, which is ostensibly what's happening now, that is concerning. It should be concerning to all of us, no matter if we identify as liberal or conservative, if we believe in democracy and we believe in free speech. Then even if we don't like it, it's the ability for people to say things when we disagree that keeps us free.
It sounds like you're saying it's possible to disagree with the content of that particular protester at the Columbia University, but also to defend that person's right to say it without being targeted for deportation.
Exactly. And I think, I know we're jumping back a few years, but there was, Ann Coulter had that whole thing, I think, in California with free speech. And I don't agree with Ann Coulter. That was a surprise to anybody watching this. But I agree with her, I agree with people's ability, even despite the fact that I may
Yeah.
disagree with what they're saying, to
We're-
say it.
Yeah, and we're jumping a bit from local to federal, and a lot of this is connected because some of this does stem down from President Trump's edict that local police should start reporting immigration and engaging in his deportation policies. But back to the police board and control of it for a moment. What gives you any reason to think that police wouldn't adhere to this within the confines of the law? Because if they suspect that someone is engaging in criminal activity, they have a duty to investigate that. And if they, in the process of their investigation, find that this person is here illegally and is engaging in a crime, I don't think that's unpopular for a person who is here illegally engaging in a crime to be deported. That's actually the process.
Why do I think it's dangerous? It's a slippery slope to
Yeah,
start.
where's the red line? Where's the line there?
Well,
for
I mean, first you
police?
have a broad mandate with suspect. I think resisting arrest has also been you could say that that's been a pretty broad charge, and a lot of times subjective to what's considered resisting arrest. You have
You think a police officer could misread the intent of the law and use it as a pretext to target people?
Sure, yes, I do. It's not saying that they would, but they do. I think the other bigger part of this is that we've seen that the Republicans who've pushed this law, and really the state we don't share the same values as we do in the city, and city voters have shown that.
But if a police officer engages in misconduct or targets somebody or uses stereotypes to go after individuals, people could file complaints with the Civilian Oversight Board.
Right, but as you know, I mean, one of the things that this law does change is that it really lessens the ability of, it takes some of the teeth out of what the Civilian Oversight Board can do. It adds another layer of a board that is not necessarily comprised of, who might not have the same values as people from the city, deciding whether or not it is a legitimate complaint.
What do you want to see from Governor Kehoe? You're right, because the Civilian Oversight Board, they can investigate, even refer discipline for a certain officer, maybe accused of doing something heinous, and then that complaint now has to go to a second layer, the state board. And the board can either say, okay, yes, we're going to also refer this discipline, or we're going to just throw it out. This is the same board that's going to be negotiating promotions, pay raises for officers, the collective bargaining agreements, the contracts with the police union. This board is going to have a lot of power over the way the city conducts a quarter of its business. And so when you think of all that, what values do you hope Governor Kehoe prioritizes in appointing people to sit on that board?
Well, if I hope Governor Kehoe prioritizes what he says he's going to prioritize. If this is really about economic development, protecting businesses, first of all, there's nothing about the state taking control of our police department, which really does that. Creating a whole new set of disruptions in our operations does not provide the continuity or stability that really businesses and the economy needs here to grow. It puts us in another, it really essentially potentially plunges us into chaos. So what I do hope is that the governor realizes that it's really more, I think, political and potentially catastrophic than life-saving at this point.
While we have you here, you've also been pushing hard in this direction of a city manager. Now, that may not be a reality in St. Louis for some time. Voters would have to weigh in, so still a few years off. But can you update us on the progress of this public discussion? Have there been sticking points? You've been engaging the public in these town halls and these conversations. What's the feel? What's the reaction that you're getting from people in St. Louis about this idea of bringing in a big director of operations as a city manager?
It's been mostly positive, and I think that, where I think these two things tie together is that that idea of continuity and stability. A city, a place, even people, you need continuity and stability to thrive. And what a city manager does, it essentially would give the city an opportunity, a really structural change to provide more continuity in our operations and allow for the city and really for its elected officials to be able to plan in a much more long-term way than I think we've been able to.
Mayor Jones argues we already have a director of operations, Nancy Cross. And this is adding another layer of bureaucracy in her view.
Right, and I respect her, and I also respectfully disagree with her position, because what the difference between a director of operations and a city manager is that a director of operations has responsibility but no authority, and that's a pretty big distinction. So
She doesn't represent the mayor's authority?
again, there's a difference between actual having the authority to hire and fire and manage the process versus reporting, having somebody report to you that is.
You're driving at the power to appoint other big key cabinet posts, which would be consolidated under this city manager.
Right.
So power stripped away from the mayor. Can you see why that would feel to this incumbent mayor like a bit of a vote of no confidence?
Well, again, as I said from the beginning, this is not about the current administration. The last draft of the bill wouldn't have the city manager starting till 2029, which is the end of the next term. And really, back to some of these big changes that we're talking about, I do think that St. Louis, to thrive, needs some big structural changes. And I think this is, one way to achieve it. Certainly, it's not the only way, but it's been a successful model in other cities, and why I am maybe a progressive person. It is not a progressive idea. 59% of cities over 100,000 people have this style of governance. Cities like Kansas City, Dallas, Oklahoma City, that are Charlotte, North Carolina, that are thriving and growing faster than St. Louis, have them.
And if I read the St. Louis archives correctly, I think we flirted with this idea about a century ago, maybe longer. But
Well, technically, we floated in 2004.
Yeah.
There was a slate of several charter changes on the ballot. And they were, I think it was a different time, and also the ballot language was very, very different. And I don't think maybe the population loss was as stark as it is now, so I feel like St. Louis has shown, it's ready for a change, and I think this is a good solution.
we saw the results in the primary. A lot of aldermen haven't come out and publicly endorsed in this race for mayor. Why do you think that is?
People have, I think, strong feelings in this election. Obviously I've seen your other stories and I saw the reports myself. So a lot of, wards and neighborhoods have flipped. And I think that people have strong
Your ward
feelings.
flipped?
My ward did flip.
It used to be, in 2021, it voted for Mayor Jones. In 2025, it is in the primary voting heavily in favor of Kara Spencer.
And it did. I mean, and I think, again, people have strong feelings, and so I think that,
Were you surprised to see the City Democratic Central Committee endorse Kara Spencer over an incumbent?
Sure. I mean, I am, and I think that, I'm not a committeeman, obviously. So I mean, I think that they made their decision. I was not a part of that decision.
What would you have done
If I was
in the chair that day
voting for,
if you were voting?
well, my vote to me in this election is private, so I'm not endorsing anybody.
Okay.
I'm staying out of it. I think it's, I think that we need to focus on the issues at hand. And, again, this is frankly, it's a very polarizing election, and people are going to feel how they're going to feel. And right now, I'm focused on some big structural changes.
You're preserving your political capital for whichever mayor wins, so you're not going in with on the wrong foot.
Well, I'm really focused on the city manager piece, and
Yeah.
I've been working on some vacancy bills that I passed this session, and those will not come to term, but they'll be go into effect on September 1st. So there's some things that I'm working on that I want to work with people regardless of who's mayor or comptroller.
Sure. You've worked some with Kara Spencer at the Board of Aldermen, and she seems to have a clear lead in the polling that we saw on the primary turnout. What are some things that you want to see from her should she become mayor? What are some commitments that you hope she makes to the people of St. Louis before they finally cast their vote, perhaps for her on April 8th?
Well, I do hope that, I know Mayor Jones has said she's going to fight for local control, and I hope that Alderwoman Spencer is just as committed to fighting for local control. I think it is an incredibly important issue happening right now in our city. I think smart economic development is important. I also think a city manager is important. I think that one of the key pieces that's in the legislation is most city managers have an Office of Economic Development that's outside of their development corporation. They have that in Kansas City. I would love to see a mayor support an Office of Economic Development that is outside of SLDC, so we can have some more transparency, but really that we can all be on the same page when it comes to supporting responsible development, because we can't grow and thrive without it, but we can't be giving away everything for free.
All right. Any predictions going into this race?
No, I mean, I think I think it's going to be, we're going to, I think it's going to be an interesting vote, and I'm going to be watching the polls just probably like you will.
All right. Alderwoman Daniela Velazquez, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.